Hello, dear students. I'm Dr. Irona from the Department of English, Christo Jayanti University, and we would be discussing the renowned documentary, The Elephant Whisperers. First, we'll take a look at the background of this documentary. Um, the story follows the life of Bowman and Belly, an indigenous couple from the Kattunayakan tribe. It's set in the Mudumalai Tiger Reserve in Tamil Nadu, and it explores the nurturing relationship with orphaned elephants, especially Raghu and Ammu. And it was a documentary which won the 2023 Academy Awards for the best documentary in the short segment. The cultural context of this particular documentary is rooted in the traditions of the Katunaikan tribe, and the way they live in harmony with nature. And it talks about the indigenous knowledge system that they have. And it talks about the ecological wisdom that they exercise in their daily lives. It's quite in contrast with the local traditions, with the modern environmental conservation policies that we see, but it celebrates the kinship between the species, the humans and the animals. Human beings as a part of this ecosystem and not outside it is one of the most profound messages which has been given through this documentary. That's about the cultural context. And let's discuss about the representation of the indigenous identity. Now, as we mentioned that there's a particular tribe which is being documented about, and it portrays the indigenous communities as custodians of ecological harmony. It essentially moves away from the colonial stereotypes that we've seen that indigenous tribes or tribal systems are primitive in nature. Instead, it defies all of that and takes pride and dignity in this deep environmental knowledge that these tribal communities, indigenous communities possess. It offers a visibility in that sense to the marginalized voices within the Indian environmental discourse, is what is shown through this documentary. There's a profound human animal relationship that is seen very closely. It's one of the central themes, in fact, the interspecies empathy, the empathetic relationship, which is again evident from the still of from the documentary. The elephants symbolize the emotional intelligence. In fact, the elephant on the right side is Raghu, and on the left side is Ammu, and the man in the central position of the portrait is Bowman, and on the extreme right is Benny, and they're the caregivers of these orphaned elephants. It shows how humans protect elephants and how there's a deep bond, there's an emotional space which is there between the humans and the animals in the backdrop of this dense forest. There's an eco-cultural perspective which also comes to the forefront. It closely aligns with the eco-critical and post-humanist thought, definitely, which is put forward by Donna Haraway, a post-humanist theorist. And we could look into how, it illustrates the lived sustainability within indigenous practice systems. It emphasizes on the mutual respect that is there, and it's quite cyclical in nature. There's an interdependence of human beings and the nature over here. And nature is not a backdrop in that sense, but it's an active participant in cultural life. um, this discussion also leads to another important aspect that we should ponder on. Gender roles is something very we should be looking at very closely, and especially the role of belly is what is thought provoking in that sense, and it compels us to reflect on this fact that she's an ecofeminist. She's an indigenous ecofeminist, and there's a lot of ethics in foreplay, and there's a lot of nurture and responsibility associated with the ecofeminist role that she has taken up. She defies all the patriarchal norms. She challenges the patriarchal norms, and wherein the males are often given the roles of the caregivers of these animals. Instead, she defies all of that and she takes the center stage and is quite active in the agency of ecological work. And the care over here becomes an act of resilience, and this also heals her because she's lost her loved one, lost her daughter, she's lost her ex-husband, and there's a lot of healing that happens through the human animal relationship. The elephants heal her. The loss of a child is something which has a deep impact, a psychological trauma on any individual for that matter. And Belly overcomes that from the love that she receives from the animal world. Knowledge transmission happens as she passes on this information, the indigenous practices, and how there's the worship that happens from the human side for these animals, especially the elephant. She passes on this information, the knowledge system, to her granddaughter. So, in that sense, she is a custodian of ecological knowledge, indigenous ecological knowledge. She reclaims the domestic labor as cultural and environmental stewardship. Now, there's a lot of global reception. There was a huge impact internationally after this documentary came out, and it talks about the indigenous and ecological storytelling technique, and it strengthens the awareness of the ethical coexistence and ecological sustainability that India boasts of. It often bridges the cultural narratives with the global climate discourse. It's as if the indigenous practices that is at par with various global Western policies that are in place, and it reinforces the role of documentary cinema in cultural preservation. Next, we should be talking about the post colonial aspect and how we can read that these narratives of wildlife as resources of for human control. There was a certain sense which was associated with colonial narratives that often talked about nature as resources, whereas these indigenous experiences and practices defy that. They defy the Western conservation models and takes up this discourse of sustainability through coexistence, that human beings and nature and various aspects of nature should coexist. It questions the separation, that human beings should be separated from nature, that we should be westernized or globalized in a certain sense, that we forget our roots in nature. So it restores these local voices that turn global in that sense. From local to global, there's an environmental discourse and a very profound one that creates a lot of meaning. Then we should be talking about the visual aesthetics and symbolism. The cinematography is on point, is quite slow and very tender and immersive. It gives an experience that is something that stays with you for some time. It mirrors the ecological rhythm which is there in nature. There's very subtle use of light, especially most of it is shot in natural light to capture the nature. Nothing is better than capturing it in natural light. There's a lot of silence, pauses. In life in general, we see silences, and silences often mean that there's some pause. Pause can also mean that there is some sadness, some somber elements there, which are shown through these meaningful silences in the documentary. There are close shots taken of the bond that Belly and Bowman share with the two orphaned elephants, Raghu and Ammu. And these shots creates this intimacy with nature. Further, the elephants symbolize wisdom and collective memory of nature. And the forest, in fact, acts as a home which is a sacred space of both the animal world and also the indigenous cultural tribal people. Lastly, we should celebrate this documentary as it brings forth a wonderful cultural lens that reveals and also celebrates at the same uh, hand about and also talks about a discourse which is rooted in ecology, indigenous knowledge system, talks about gender roles, and redefines human identity from a sense where it belonged to create a sort of dominance in nature. From that dominance, they travel towards coexistence. And therefore, there's a lot of celebration that happens in this harmony. They celebrate through this documentary, they celebrate the harmony between the humans and the non humans. There's a poetic reminder, it's a very aesthetic and artistic reminder that care and nurturing is a universal language. I hope you have a great time watching this documentary. Thank you.